Hello, this is Chloe here at Inner Whispers. Today I'll be doing another tarot deck review, this time of the Heart Tarot by Maria Distefano, published by Scarabeo. This is, as you can see, a heart-shaped deck, so I thought it would be very relevant to use for the forthcoming week of Valentine's Day 2012. The box it comes in is very sturdy, and just as the box is heart-shaped, so too are the cards, and even the little white book. So, these cards have a real charm to them. The artwork is very well executed, and the images themselves are distinctly quirky, full of delight. Quite magical, with centaurs and fairies, angels, enormous pigeons and tiny people, rather gnome-like characters. There are a lot of hearts on a lot of the cards, as you might expect, it being the Heart Tarot, but also images that are more old-fashioned or tribal. And there really are a lot of interesting details in these cards that make them a pleasure to read with. However, this is a deck that you would probably have to use intuitively, I would say, because quite a lot of the cards don't conform to any traditional meanings. Obviously, the majors do follow traditional patterns. For example, here we have the Lovers, with a sense of opposites and connection and choices, a siren and a centaur trying to find one another. And some do seem to have a traditional focus. For example, here we have the Nine of Wands, and it is someone behind a load of bars. Still, she has quite a different feel from a normal defensive. It almost looks more like she's trapped rather than defending something. However, these images do allow for very easy interpretation, and there are some absolutely amazing cards that delight me. For example, here we have Delilah ready to cut Samson's hair as the card for strength. I find this version of the Four of Pentacles with two children going into a little labyrinth quite delightful. Likewise, the Four of Wands has that real sense of celebration. And there's something very interesting about the Two of Wands. Instead of looking out over the world from a castle, he's looking out from on top of some stilts, and how would that affect his sense of balance and his choices? Very different perspective in the Tower, seeing it almost from underneath, and still with a sense of love as the two people seem to reach for one another despite their catastrophic circumstances. The Six of Swords likewise still has a theme of movement and perhaps of protecting one another. And I'm not sure whether the Two of Swords has anything traditional at all, and yet I still find it a really charming image. There's a distinct quirkiness to these, and I think you would have to agree they're absolutely beautiful. As I say, they really don't conform to traditional ideas. For example, in this Five of Swords, I don't get the sense of humiliation and defeat as this couple dance the tango in a sword-strewn room. The Seven of Swords shows a child drawing a heart. And the Devil here reminds me rather of the Queen of Swords from the Thoth deck. Interestingly, I find this Seven of Cups to be perhaps closer in some ways to the sense of the Two of Cups than the actual Two of Cups, which, although it shows a couple embracing, has a certain darkness to it. The Five of Pentacles is rather more hopeful than the traditional. And the Ace of Pentacles perhaps less so, with a feeling of selling yourself. Sometimes the cards don't seem to match their elemental attributions. Who would guess that this was the Five of Wands as it's set in Venice? Likewise, the Seven of Pentacles with 7 lily pads isn't particularly earthy. And this Six of Cups with an artist at his work reminds me rather more of a traditional Eight of Pentacles. A pincushion with 8 pins is the Eight of Swords, and yet has a feeling of the Three of Swords to it. And this Eight of Cups has no sense of leaving things behind, but perhaps rather more the Seven of Cups of choices and illusions. The Nine of Pentacles gives me no sense of independence or having worked hard for what you got. It seems rather more like your traditional Four of Pentacles. And the Three of Pentacles has more echoes of the Six of Pentacles somehow, of charity, generosity, or even of the Five of Pentacles being in a time of hardship. I guess a couple of storks building a nest do have a sense of responsibility, but the sense of burdens isn't quite as apparent in this Ten of Swords. And the knights are very peculiar creatures, which is perhaps not so very far from the truth. And here we have the actual Three of Swords, which to me doesn't speak at all of heartbreak and pain, and once again is a very watery card, which I think happens quite a lot in all of the suits, so it doesn't have that sense of air that you might expect of a swords card. The use of hearts is very obvious in many of the cards, which is a little bit confusing given that often the suit of cups is associated with hearts in a more traditional deck. Another card which seems to belie its elemental associations. Here we have the Three of Wands with a huge koi carp and some birds, so water and air, and you wonder, where is the fire of this suit? I find a certain charm in the Seven of Swords. The 7 birds flying away speak less of treachery but more of gathering ideas from different places, moving on. And we have another strange little gnome creature for the Ten of Cups, yet he's alone in a card which I would traditionally see as representing family. Likewise, the Eight of Pentacles doesn't feel very grounded. It seems like she's in outer space. However, altogether, I would say that this is a delightful deck. The cards can be a little bit tricky to shuffle. It takes a bit of getting used to. It can be done, and you do have the central bit to sort of base it yourself on. You're not going to be able to draw reversals without realising it, that's for sure. But they are a little bit tricky to handle, partly because of their size and partly because of their shape. But it is a very interesting deck, and one that certainly would be great for doing readings at Valentine's, if you have an event or something like that, and which do have an incredible amount of charm and beauty to them. So it's a deck that I would highly recommend. I hope you found this review useful and that you'll come back again soon. In the meantime, please listen to your own inner whispers.